Most people in the test prep industry are gonna balk at giving you an actual number when you ask what is a good GMAT score. I'm gonna give you real numbers, actual test scores. I'm Erika with Target Test Prep, and in today's video, I'm gonna tell you what a good GMAT score is. There are several ways to look at this question, and we are gonna come at it from all angles. We will also definitively answer whether the holy grail 700 plus GMAT score is something that you should be shooting for in 2026. First, my cred, I have a 770 on the old GMAT or a 735 on the GMAT Focus, which is either a 99th or 100th percentile, depending on what tables you're looking at. All right, first up, what is a good test score for all test takers? This is a pretty easy question to answer because GMAT releases updated percentiles every year. Now, there are a lot of numbers in here, but here are some key benchmarks from the most recent update in 2025. For a median or 50th percentile score, you need a 565, which is slightly above the average score of about 555. For a 75th percentile score, you need a 615. A 655 is a 90th percentile score, a 715 is a 99th percentile score, and a 735 is a 100th percentile score, which I'm going to be honest, I don't totally understand from a statistical standpoint, but that isn't the point of this video. Now, from a very general perspective, most people would say that a top quartile score is a good score. So if I had to give one number in answer to this question, I would say a 75th percentile score or a 615 is a good GMAT score. And if that's good enough for you, see ya, you can end the video here. But it's actually a pretty useless answer. So let's dig a little bit deeper and look at what is a good test score for specific programs. Just like GMAT, business schools also release score percentiles for admitted students on an annual basis as part of a class profile. Now, be careful when you do your research here. Since GMAT scores are good for 5 years, many schools still report GMAT school percentiles based on the old GMAT and the old GMAT score scale. You should not compare scores directly between the old GMAT and the current version of the GMAT Focus. So be sure to find GMAT score percentiles for each school based on the current score scale. Alternatively, you can convert old GMAT scores into new GMAT scores by comparing their percentiles. GMAT has a score concordance table that makes this super easy, and we'll look at it later in this video. Most schools tend to release a few different score percentile stats. So a common one is going to be either average or median score. And then another common one is the score range for a typical student. So a common variation of this is the middle 80% of students or the 10th to the 90th percentile. Now, as before, a 75th percentile is a typical target for a good score or a score that makes a solid case for admission at a particular program. So at UW-Foster, where the median score is a 655 and the middle 80% of students score between a 615 and a 695, a 75th percentile score is going to be somewhere between a 655 and a 695. At Harvard Business School, where a median score is a 685 and the middle 80% of students score between a 645 and a 735, a 75th percentile score is going to be somewhere between a 685 and a 735. However, there are complicating factors here. It's important to consider that your test score is just one piece of a broader application picture. So while a strong test score can improve your candidacy, an average or even below average test score can be balanced out by the strength of other elements of your application. Conversely, even a top test score can't compensate for major gaps in other areas of your application. It's also worth weighing the impact of test optionality. While the rise of test optional is at least partially behind the recent increase in high scorers due to lower scorers self-selecting out of the test, it also means that less weight is placed on the test at relevant schools. While a score on the lower end for admitted students may be a strong negative at a test-required program, it may not be as big of a deal breaker at a test optional program. At the end of the day, a good score is a score that gets you admitted, and the majority of students admitted to a program are admitted with a score below that 75th percentile number or without a score at all. So that 75th percentile number at any given program should be more of an indicator than a cutoff. Which leads us to our next question. What is a good test score for you? What a good score means to you is going to be intensely personal, and not just because of which programs you're applying to, but because of where you're starting and how long you have to get where you're going. If you're starting with a 605 score, study for 4 months, and end up with a 615, that's maybe not a great score for you. A study timeline on the high end of average ideally would have netted you more than a 6 percentile point increase. On the other hand, if you're starting with a 555 score, study for 2 months, and end up with a 615, that's a much better score for you, up 28 percentile points from where you started with a study timeline on the low end of average. And then, of course, there are additional factors like how much time per week you can commit to studying, how much you're investing in resources like courses or tutoring, how easily solvable the specific issues costing you points are, etc., etc. But ignoring some of these complexities, Target Test Prep finds that on average, GMAT students tend to need about 180 hours of studying to achieve a 50 to 80 point increase, and about 240 to 360 hours to achieve a 100 to 150 point increase. So a good score for you would look like an improvement along these lines. Now, if you're finding that a good score for you is quite a bit different than a good score for specific programs you're applying to, I highly recommend checking out my video on how to improve your GMAT score fast. I'm talking 100 points in 2 weeks. Not every tip will work for every test takers, but these are real stories from real students, and they just might work for you. And then finally, I want to quickly address a personal pet peeve, and that is, what is a good test score for the GMAT Focus? Something that has plagued my entire career in GMAT prep is an obsession with 700 plus scores. Now, it was kind of silly with the old GMAT where a 700 was a 90th percentile. It is extremely silly now with the GMAT Focus where a 705 is a 98th percentile. This isn't just much harder to obtain, it's not a worthwhile goal. Agonizing over a score in the high 600s when it's a top 5 percentile score is a complete waste of your energy. Whether you have a 7 at the beginning of your GMAT score has literally never mattered to business schools, and a couple percentile points is never going to be the deciding factor on whether you're admitted or not. Focus on other parts of your application. I promise, they're more important. So, can I give you one number for what a good score is? Not a particularly helpful one. But what I can do is give you a bunch of numbers and some guidance on how to navigate them to determine what a good score is for you and your goals. If this video helped you, give it a like and subscribe for more content like it. And if you have suggestions for future videos, please leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.